Borders, be it a state border or a border of a larger political space, such as the European Union, delimit a political and social space and define who belongs to the social order. This points to the ordering function of borders and the interrelation between borders and social orders. One of the main functions of contemporary borders is migration management and control of cross-border mobility. In this regard, borders function as membranes and have also been referred to as selection machines that open and close simultaneously for different people, allowing for differential inclusion and exclusion. While some people cross borders without effort, others are kept out or given only partial rights once they have crossed. This depends very much on their citizenship and economic and cultural capital. More generally, borders serve as classification systems. In their function as mobility control, borders create differentiations through which migrants are categorized and classified, for example, into tourists, labor migrants, and illegalized migrants. Based on social and symbolic demarcation, borders serve as identity markers. By reducing complexity, they define the boundaries between us and them. This is also based on othering, the formation of hierarchized and sometimes racialized subjects whose mobility is seen as either legitimate or illegitimate. Against notions of static and monolithic borders, today's borders are complex, omnipresent, and dynamic. Rumford argued that borders appear as increasingly messy, diffusing not only spatially but also in form. Borders comprise an untidy collection of activities and sites of action littered across society. And instead of being a line, the border rather ensembles a scape or an assemblage based on infrastructures and technologies, laws, discourses, social networks, databases, and institutions in order to sort, control, and assign people and things a certain status. Instead of speaking of borders as a noun, it makes thus more sense to speak of bordering as an active process. And at the same time, borders are also shaped by the counter-hegemonic power of migrants and other actors. Since the 1990s, the EU has made border management and mobility control as one of its core tasks. The debordering and free mobility within the EU went hand in hand with rebordering at the fringes of the EU and the externalization of migration control. This was based on the introduction of extensive visa requirements in Western Europe, what Henk van Houten has called paper borders, and the inclusion of non-EU countries into the EU border and migration management. Even if the balance of power is asymmetric, this also means that the EU and individual EU nation states lose their sovereignty, or that neighboring countries are rewarded by the EU with the lifting of visa requirements for their citizens. According to the European Union, borders and migration control promise to maintain security and order. In order to filter out people seen as potentially harmful to social order, borders are increasingly securitized and inhumane. On the outer fringes of the European Union, and to some extent on the fringes of nation states within the EU, borders are increasingly materialized in the form of fences and walls by being secured by border guards who use infrared cameras and other technological devices to detect migrants deemed a threat. Those who attempt to cross a border unauthorized experience systematic and violent pushbacks at land and sea borders, as reported by the Border Violence Network. In response, undocumented migrants are taking increasingly dangerous routes by land and sea. Dependent on smugglers and without the ability to rely on the rule of law, they are often exploited and risk their lives, making the Mediterranean the deadliest region for migrants. More generally, today's borders take different forms and locations and are characterized by plurality and complexity. Borders are also found outside and inside the national territory, for example in embassies, airports, detention and reception centers. This points to the versatility of borders and their externalization and internalization. Borders are also increasingly based on the collection of diverse digital information, such as biometric data, which enables unique identification, or other personal data, which form so-called data doubles. Such data doubles can be accessed from different locations and filtered using algorithms, so we can also speak of digital borders. This brings me to my last point. While some parts of today's borders are clearly visible, such as the iconic walls along the US-Mexico border or the border between Serbia and Hungary, which was only established in 2015, most of today's borders, both paper borders and digital borders, remain largely invisible. Today's borders are also increasingly individualized, as they are based on the production and screening of individualized data doubles. Both of these factors contribute to the fact that bordering mechanisms are often barely noticed, especially by those who are not yet personally affected by them. However, for those whose mobility options are limited, paper boundaries and digital boundary demarcations are often extremely effective. They can arise at any time and at any place, but at the same time they are often the most inhumane and non-transparent. Therefore, today's border mechanisms not only limit migrants' mobilities and rights, but also threaten the normative, human right-based order of the European Union.